The wheels find the pavement, and within a few pedal strokes the parking lot is gone behind us. On one side, water. On the other, a wall of maple and basswood catching the low October light. This ribbon of asphalt we are riding is smoother and straighter than any trail has a right to be, and there is a reason for that. 100 years ago this was a railroad. Before that it was the homeland of the Dakota, who gave this place a name that means the Singing Hills. Today we ride it, and we listen for what it still has to say. We are in south-central Minnesota, near the small town of Waterville, at Sakatah Lake State Park. The park covers about 842 acres wrapped around the south shore of a lake that is really a wide, slow bulge in a river. That river is the Cannon, and it threads a whole chain of shallow lakes through this country before it turns east and eventually reaches the Mississippi. The paved path under our tires is the Sakatah Singing Hills State Trail, a 41-mile line that runs from Faribault in the east to Mankato in the west. And for a few quiet miles, it cuts straight through the middle of this park. Our ride today is a short one, about 7 3/4 miles, but the story packed into it runs back many thousands of years. Notice how level the trail is. There are no sharp climbs, no sudden drops, just a long, gentle grade that barely rises or falls. A cyclist feels it as ease, but that ease is an inheritance. Railroads could not tolerate steep hills, so the engineers who laid this route more than a century ago spent enormous effort keeping the grade flat, cutting through rises and filling in the low spots. We are gliding today on the patience of people who moved this earth by hand and by horse. The forest has closed back in over their work, but the shape of the land here is still theirs. The word Sakatah comes from the Dakota, the people who lived in this country long before any survey line was drawn. It is most often translated as the Singing Hills. The story attached to that name points to the rolling hills that surround the lake, and to the sound the wind makes as it moves across them, a low and eerie music that early listeners heard as singing. When the state built the park and the trail, it kept the Dakota word rather than replacing it, and some of the footpaths inside the park carry Dakota names as well. It is a small act of memory, a way of admitting that this ground was named and loved and understood long before it was a park. Through the trees on our right, the lake keeps appearing and disappearing. It is calm this morning, the surface barely moving, mirroring the yellowing leaves. This is the kind of water the Dakota knew intimately, not as scenery but as a road. Before there were rails or roads or trails, the way you traveled this country was by canoe, following the rivers and the strings of lakes they fed. Keep that in mind as we ride, because the flat, easy line we are enjoying is only the most recent way through a landscape that has always been a corridor. The band of Dakota most closely tied to this river were the Wahpekute, one of the 7 council fires of the Dakota Nation. Their name is often understood to mean the shooters among the leaves, and they lived and hunted across the valley of the Cannon River, with villages recorded in the 1800s not far downstream near present-day Faribault. This was not empty wilderness that happened to be passed through. It was a homeland, with seasonal rounds of hunting, fishing, and gathering keyed to the woods, the prairie, and the water. When we ride through here, we are moving across the middle of a world that had been fully inhabited for a very long time. Here the trees pull back and the whole lake opens out beside us. See how wide and shallow it looks, more like a flooded meadow than a deep northern lake. That is exactly what it is. Sakatah Lake is not a separate body of water at all. It is a place where the Cannon River slows down and spreads out, one bead on a long string of such lakes. Understanding that one fact changes how you see everything around you, so let us follow the river for a moment. The Cannon River carries a name built on a mistake. The Wahpekute called it, in their own language, the River of the Standing Rock, after a tall sandstone formation that once rose along its banks downstream. French-speaking traders and travelers, seeing the many Dakota canoes drawn up along the water, called it the River of the Canoes, La Rivière aux Canots. Over the years, the word canots was worn down and misheard in English until it became canon. And so a river named for boats now carries the name of a weapon it never had anything to do with. The chain of lakes it strings together, Sakatah among them, are simply the wide, patient pauses in its long journey toward the Mississippi. Back under the trees, the trail runs arrow straight again. It is worth remembering that almost nothing about this country is truly flat by nature. The smoothness we feel is engineered, but the gentle rolling hills just beyond the trees are not. Those hills were made by ice. To understand why this lake exists, and why the surrounding hills seem to hum, we have to go back to the last great glaciation, when a wall of ice stood over everything we can see. Roughly 14,000 years ago, during the last glaciation, a great tongue of ice known as the Des Moines Lobe pushed down out of the north and covered this part of Minnesota. When the climate warmed and the ice began to melt, it did not retreat cleanly. It stalled here, and as it wasted away it dumped everything it had been carrying, a jumbled load of clay, sand, gravel, and boulders, into a thick blanket of debris called a moraine. That is what these hills are made of. And buried within that melting ice were enormous stranded blocks, chunks the size of hills that took decades to melt. Where one of those giant ice blocks finally melted out, it left a basin in the ground, and that basin, filled with water, is the lake we are riding beside. The ice did more than leave a lake. As it moved and melted, it sculpted the debris beneath it into long, streamlined mounds, smooth whale-backed hills that all point the same direction, the direction the ice was traveling. Geologists call these drumlins, and this region is full of them. They are the singing hills of the name. When the wind sweeps up and over their steep flanks, it can take on a low moaning, whistling voice, and it is easy to imagine how, on a cold and open night, that sound became the song that gave this whole country its Dakota name. Every gentle rise our trail crosses is a fingerprint left by a glacier that has been gone for 140 centuries. Now the forest thickens and the canopy nearly closes over the trail. Look up. The trees leaning over us are mostly sugar maple and basswood, tall and straight, their crowns knitting together into a roof. This is not an ordinary Minnesota woodland. What we are riding through is a surviving piece of one of the rarest and most remarkable forests the state ever held, a forest that has very nearly vanished everywhere else. Early French explorers called it the Grand Bois, the Big Woods. It was a dense island of hardwood forest, thousands of square miles of it, that stood in south-central Minnesota, where the eastern woodlands made their last stand against the open prairie. Inside it, sugar maple and basswood dominated, joined by elm, oak, and ironwood, growing so thick that the interior stayed shaded and cool even in high summer. When settlers arrived, they found the big woods both an obstacle and a prize, and within a few generations, almost all of it was cleared for farms. Today, only scattered fragments remain, and the forest along this shore is one of them. Ride slowly through here and let the quality of the place register. The air is cooler under this canopy. The ground on either side is a soft carpet of fallen leaves, and there is very little underbrush, because the maples cast such deep shade that few plants can survive on the floor below them. This is what a mature maple and basswood forest feels like, hushed, shadowed, and layered. It is the character that made the big woods famous, and it is exactly what was lost almost everywhere when the Axis came. There is a small miracle in the fact that this forest is here at all. By a quirk of history and ownership, the woods on the south shore of Sakatah Lake were never logged off the way the surrounding country was. That is why, when people in the 1960s began looking for a place to protect, this shoreline stood out. The trees here include genuinely old growth, survivors that trace back through the whole sweep of settlement, and the park is recognized today as a rare remnant of the original big woods. Riding beneath them, we are among some of the last of a forest that once seemed endless. And we have come at the perfect moment to see it. It is the 1st of October, and the maples are turning. A sugar maple in autumn is one of the great sights of the North American woods, its leaves shifting through yellow and orange into deep scarlet, and here they are doing it all at once, overhead and underfoot. Every gust sends a few more spinning down onto the trail in front of us. This is the forest performing the trick that made it valuable to the Dakota and to the settlers alike. That autumn color is not just beautiful, it is the visible edge of a whole way of life. The sugar maples that blaze around us in October are the same trees that run with sweet sap in early spring, and for the Dakota the maple stands were sugar bush, tapped each year to make maple sugar in a season so important it named a moon in their calendar. The same trees fed the people, colored the hills, and built the shaded world of the big woods. When you watch these leaves come down, you are watching a tree that has been at the center of human life in this valley for as far back as memory runs. Look far down the trail. See how it runs perfectly straight for what seems like a mile, a clean corridor cut through the trees. No footpath was ever this straight. No wagon road, no deer trail. Only one kind of traveler demanded a line like this, and that traveler ran on iron. To understand the very ground we are riding on, we have to leave the deep past and come forward to the age of the railroad. In 1882, crews pushed a rail line into this country, reaching Waterville, and within a few years the iron had been extended west to Mankato. The railroad changed everything. Grain, timber, and livestock that once moved slowly by wagon could now travel fast to distant markets, and the small towns strung along the line, Waterville among them, grew up around their depots. The particular route we are riding was stitched together over the following decades from more than one company, including the Chicago Great Western and the Chicago and Northwestern, the great railway names that lace this whole part of the Midwest together with steel. Feel the ride now with new eyes. Every curve is a broad and gentle railroad curve, engineered so a heavy train could take it without slowing. Where the land dips, we ride across an embankment the crews built up. Where it rises, we pass through a cut they carved down. For nearly a century, freight and passengers rolled along this exact alignment, past this exact lake. Then, as highways took over and the traffic dried up, the train stopped coming and the line fell silent. By the 1970s, the railroad had gone quiet and the corridor was abandoned. It could have vanished, sold off in pieces and plowed back into the surrounding fields. Instead, the state of Minnesota acquired the empty right-of-way and did something that was still a new idea at the time. It pulled up the rails and the ties and turned the whole line into a public trail. The Sakatah Singing Hills State Trail was dedicated in 1980, first as a simple surface and later, in the mid-1990s, paved from end to end. The path under our wheels is a railroad reborn as a place to ride. Because it follows the old rail bed, this trail does something ordinary trails cannot. It carries you in a nearly straight, nearly level line for miles, right through the heart of a landscape, connecting town to town the way the trains once did. A cyclist today can ride the full 41 miles from Faribault to Mankato in an afternoon, passing lakes and woods and farm fields, following a route chosen not for beauty, but for the cold logic of moving freight. That the logic of the railroad ended up preserving this beautiful corridor is one of the happy accidents of history. But the railroads and the farms did not arrive into an empty land, and it would be a poorer story to pretend they did. The reason settlers could pour into this valley in the 1860s and 70s, laying rails and clearing the big woods, is that the Dakota who had lived here for centuries were pushed out first. To ride this trail honestly is to hold both things at once, the ingenuity of the people who built the railroad and the loss that made room for it. In 1851, in a pair of treaties signed at places called Traverse des Sioux and Mendota, the Dakota ceded most of southern Minnesota, tens of millions of acres, in exchange for promised payments and a narrow reservation along the Minnesota River. The Wahpekute were among the bands who signed away their rights to this very country, the Valley of the Cannon. The promises that followed were poorly kept, and the pressures built toward the tragic War of 1862 and the mass removal of the Dakota from the state. The quiet farm country we ride through today, the fields beyond these trees, exists because of those treaties and everything that came after them. The state park itself came much later, and it came in part because of that unlogged forest on the shore. In 1962, people began asking whether this stretch of the lake should be protected, and the idea drew strong local support. The following year, the Minnesota legislature authorized it in a bill that created more than a dozen new state parks at once, and in 1967, Sakatah Lake State Park opened to the public. Today it offers dozens of miles of trail, more than 60 campsites tucked among the trees, a boat ramp, and fishing on the lake, all wrapped around that surviving scrap of the big woods. Back beside the water, the lake shows its other life. Across the way you might catch the shape of a fishing pier or a canoe drawn quietly along the reeds. For all its history, Sakatah is still a working lake in the plainest sense, a place people come to fish and paddle. Let us look for a moment at what actually lives in and around this slow, shallow water, because it is far richer than it first appears. Because the lake is really a wide, warm, shallow reach of the Cannon River, it teems with the fish that thrive in such water. Anglers pull walleye, largemouth and white bass, northern pike and panfish from Sakatah, and the calm current makes it a gentle place to paddle a canoe, following in the faintest way the water roads the Dakota traveled long ago. Shallow, sun-warmed and fed by a slow river, the lake is a nursery for fish and a magnet for everything that eats them. And what eats them, most spectacularly, comes on wings. Watch the shallows as we ride. In the still edges where the reeds grow, the water does the patient work of a marsh, and that work draws the birds. This corner of Minnesota sits under one of the great aerial highways of the continent, and a shallow, food-rich lake like this one is a rest stop on it. If we are lucky, we will see some of the travelers. The most striking of the regulars is the great blue heron, a tall, patient, gray-blue bird that stands motionless in the shallows and then strikes at a fish with astonishing speed. Herons gather where the fishing is good, and the warm shallows of Sakatah are exactly that. Alongside them, the lake draws ducks and geese, gulls, white pelicans that ride the water in slow flotillas, and double-crested cormorants that nest together in noisy colonies. On the eastern end of the lake, there is a rookery where you can see the cormorants massed in their trees, a raucous, crowded neighborhood right at the edge of all this quiet. Ride with your ears open through the woods now. The forest around us is one of the best birding spots in this part of the state, and the calendar matters. We have come in the fall, when the lake fills with waterfowl staging for the journey south, but the greater spectacle comes in spring, when the trees fill with a very different kind of traveler. Naturalists have recorded more than 200 species of birds at Sakatah Lake State Park, and that astonishing number is possible only because of where it sits. The park lies at a meeting point, where the big woods, the prairie, and the river all come together, and each habitat brings its own birds. In spring, the maple and basswood canopy overhead fills with migrating warblers, tiny jewel-colored birds moving north, along with wood thrushes, scarlet tanagers, and the increasingly rare cerulean warbler, a bird of exactly this kind of tall, mature hardwood forest. The forest we are riding through is not just old and beautiful. For these birds, it is essential. It is worth pausing on that colony at the far end of the lake. Colonial water birds like cormorants and herons nest in crowded rookeries, dozens of bulky stick nests packed into a stand of trees near the water, because there is safety in numbers, and the fishing nearby is rich enough to feed them all. A rookery is one of the noisiest, most dramatic sights in the natural calendar of a place like this. A reminder that this gentle park is also, in its own way, a wild and busy nursery, generation after generation, at the water edge. Away from the water, the woods have their own residents, and autumn is a good time to notice them. The cover is thinning, the animals are busy laying in stores for winter, and there is movement everywhere just off the trail. Ride quietly and you become part of the forest rather than an intrusion into it. The most common large animal here is the white-tailed deer, and in the soft light of an October morning you will very often see one lift its head at the edge of the trail before it bounds away, its white tail flashing. Around them, the woods hold the full cast of a Minnesota hardwood forest, squirrels caching acorns, rabbits in the brush, raccoons, mink along the shoreline, and coyotes that hunt the field edges at dawn and dusk. Overhead, the woodpeckers work the dead limbs, and hawks and owls hunt the same woods the songbirds fill. It is a complete, layered community, and it survives here because the forest was never cleared. As we ride these last stretches, it is worth remembering that this ground holds more than trees and animals. The people who named these hills did not only pass through. They lived here, and they buried their dead here, and they left marks on the land that outlast any railroad. Within the park there are burial mounds, low rounded rises of earth raised by indigenous people long ago. They are sacred places, and they are also quiet, physical proof of just how deep the human history of this shoreline runs, centuries upon centuries before the first survey stake was driven. When the state kept the Dakota name for this park and its trail, and gave Dakota names to its paths, it was gesturing at exactly this, that the story here did not begin with the railroad or the farms or the park. It began with the people who called these the Singing Hills. Now the trees begin to thin ahead of us and the light broadens. Our short loop of 7 3/4 miles is winding back toward where it began. It has been an easy ride, gentle and level the whole way, And that ease has let us look around and think, which is the whole point of riding a trail like this one. Take one last long look before we finish. This is what the first days of October give you in the big woods, the maples at their peak, the air cool and clean, the lake still and gray-blue beside a corridor of falling leaves. There is no crowd, no noise, just the hum of the tires and the drift of the leaves and the occasional call of a bird out over the water. It is the kind of morning that makes you understand why people fought to keep this small piece of forest standing. We rode one short, flat, quiet trail today, and inside it we found a glacier, a river named by mistake, a lost forest, a homeland, a railroad, and a park. That is the gift of a place like Sakatah. It looks at a glance like an easy afternoon ride beside a pretty lake. It is that, but it is also 14,000 years of ice and water and human life, all folded into a single line through the trees, singing quietly to anyone who slows down enough to listen. If you rode all this way with us, thank you. The singing hills, the Cannon River, the big woods, and the old railroad will all still be here, waiting for the next season and the next rider. We hope you carry a little of this place with you, and that the next quiet trail you find gives up its own hidden history just as generously. Thank you for watching. Follow for more of the trails of the world.